Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Ryan Holtz Show podcast, voted the #1 black hosted podcast here in Canada, also top 100. If you have not smashed the 5-star review on the show, please do so. And just know that this interview will be available on youtube.com/Ryan Holtz, where you can see the full length. My next guest is one of the most amazing bourbon drinking, Celtics loving, sneaker adoring, just great human. His name is Barney Waters, and if you're not aware of who he is, he's the president of K-Swiss, and very, very incremental piece to the puzzle of kind of, I want to call K-Swiss's rebrand, rebirth. So Barney, without further ado, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. My bourbon hobby, it's a new hobby, and I've realized I wasn't really thinking it through, because now people are using it in my bio and it doesn't make me look good. But yeah, it's the truth.
Why doesn't that make you look good? No, speak to that. What the heck is wrong with bourbon?
Well,
There's nothing wrong with bourbon.
No, but if you're going to pick a hobby, whiskeys, why couldn't I have picked jogging?
Okay. If you're gonna go down if you're gonna go down the path of life choices for the betterment, bourbon's probably not the ideal one. Tell me though, how did you kind of get onto bourbon? Did somebody introduce you to it? Was it a funny story? Like, how did that happen?
I think, I was actually a friend introduced me. I couldn't even smell the stuff growing up. But, whiskey is one of those things I'm like, the smell gives me shivers. So I think when you get older, your tastes change. And somebody introduced me. I think I probably closed my eyes, held my nose, and did a whiskey shot. They call it a boiler maker, a beer and a whiskey at a party. Someone sort of forced me to do it. All right, I'll do it. And then I was like, actually, that wasn't bad. And so that's probably led me into the journey. But then, once you get into it, it's really, I think, it's like collecting sneakers or being into sneakers. It's the drops, the special versions, the brands, the history behind the process of making it that sort of draws you in. Now I find myself, I'm not buying, crappy whiskey. I'm buying like really nice stuff. And I actually, my wife was laughing at me because I got one and I Windexed the bottle. I've sprayed with Windex and I'm getting it so it's nice and shiny, and I'm putting it on the shelf. I may never open it. And that's like, there's a lot of parallels to any kind of collecting, I guess.
Barney, I'm going to tell you a funny story. My wife and I, we love to collect like really good liquor and booze, and through the show we get, liquor companies that will send us, free merch and all that stuff. I got this really fancy bottle. And I don't know if it's a testament to my humble beginnings of, really growing up with not much money. But I got this bottle and I said, honey, I want to crack this open. She said, man, Ryan, your life was a long time ago. We're doing great now. I said, I don't know what it is. This is just like, I might not ever get this specific brand or bottle again. Yeah. We landed up drinking the whole thing, Barney, and I'm not even kidding you. I filled the bottle up with like some soda and some apple juice. So it kind of looked like I put it right back on the shelf. We had some company one time, and I guess this one person came over, and he's like some sort of whiskey connoisseur. And he's like, well, Ryan, let's taste it out. And I'm like, I just really don't want to open this bottle right now. And can we go to the other bottle? Anyways, Barney, thanks so much for coming on the show. This is a show that, we've had some really amazing guests on, and just some really awesome, some of the best minds in business, also some celebrities, musicians, things like that. And I like to really articulate to our audience, the art of what it really takes to have success in whatever you do. I want to give you the example of when I slid into your DMs and I sent you a text version of the DM, and you seen it and you ignored it. And this is going to be a good story. And then I said, oh, hell no. He is not going to ignore my first DM. So I whipped the phone around and I said, no. We're going to get some video message going in there. And I tell people all the time, the art of the introduction on video versus just a normal text is dramatically different, in my opinion. So could you speak to that?
Well, yeah, and it's making compelling content that breaks through, but it's also personalization. Hey, Barney, this is Ryan. Okay, somebody's taken the time, and there's a lot of lazy selling out there. And I'm not saying you were selling to me, but LinkedIn, somebody connects with you, and the first thing they do is like just go into this long-winded thing about their SEO service. It's like, that's an easy delete. They're not thinking, they're not personalizing it. You got to know it's not me that's the person who's choosing our SEO agency in a company. It's my look, just search for the head of e-commerce,
Yes.
So yeah, and I think after doing some things, like if you do a ClubHouse session, for example, right afterwards, you get a lot of
Yes.
incoming inquiries, and it's hard to get to them all. It's hard to pay attention. I
Yes.
definitely try, but it's not always easy. So yeah, like a breakthrough message is really important.
What is your thoughts on Clubhouse, by the way? It's a
Well, I
it's a
think there's
crazy.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of diamonds in the rough. There's a lot of junk to get through,
Absolutely.
and but every now and then you find like an amazing dialogue, and I think I found those. I mean, I've gotten some really interesting discussions. I've just dropped into rooms and they're like, oh, there's a guy from K-Swiss. They look at your profile. Next thing you know, you're on stage talking about why is there not enough black representation in the sneaker industry?
Yes. Ooh.
And I'm not even supposed to be here, but like, wow, what an amazing dialogue. And I've made connections from there. In fact, I have a call after this with someone I'm talking to about some design work that I met on one of those rooms, so.
Yes.
And then the other night I was listening to some friends of mine do a weekly show, and they did it about NFTs, which is like crypto art. It's like the hottest buzz thing in the
Yep.
world, right?
Yep.
But they had Gary V on there, who's someone I've worked with before, but they also had some of the biggest names in crypto art, not only the artists, but also the people behind Coinbase and some of these things. Wow. I mean, and it was the biggest names, I would say, in NFTs and crypto art. And it was just this big open dialogue. But what you realize also is they haven't all figured it out. They're all like,
Of
they're all
course.
talking amongst themselves. I'm like, man, this is actually the industry happening. And we're all like able to sit in the audience and listen to it. That one was pretty amazing. So for every terrible room that's like, how do you know if you're a hoe?
Oh, Barney, you're making this interview too easy on me. You've given me so much good talking points.
Please don't use that as the snippet.
No,
Do me a
no, I
favor.
won't. No, I won't.
But it's there. Let's not sugarcoat it. That's what's on there, and
Yeah.
maybe it's the algorithm. But and it's like, oh my god, like what? And 300 people talking about it. It's like blows your mind. You're like, what am I doing on this? But then you'll find some like forward leading, on that room. Virgil Abloh's in there, and when would you get a chance to listen in to Virgil Abloh, Gary V, Beeple, who's one of the top, probably he just sold a $1 million piece of crypto art. He's got a Christie's auction coming up for digital art. When would you get to sit and listen in on them talking about the future of this industry? It's like, it was amazing.
Well,
There's a lot of value in there.
It is. I want to circle back to your comment about, lack of black representation in the sneaker business. Earlier on in our show, we had, I don't know if you've heard of him. His name is Jason Maiden. He was one of the very first apprentices on the Air Jordan brand. And he's a complete master of his words. If you ever hear him talk, the way he articulates, he's a very, very intellectual person that's really combined that street with just pure academia. And when I had him on, he said, hey, Ryan, like it's, when I was sitting there at Nike and, we're at the board and we're making all these shoes and our customers are clearly, a lot of African Americans that are dropping the money. But there's no real African Americans at the board making, decisions, so to speak. For K-Swiss, and obviously I've went on your social media. I've seen a lot of the things that you've done, and you're very kind of, I guess I could say, you're very vocal about that. Do you feel what you're doing in the culture you're creating at K-Swiss is keeping that topic in mind, making sure that, hey, we want to make sure that our, those voices are being heard, aka maybe your customers?
For sure. I think it's our responsibility. I think, and I think it's mandatory. I think the consumer demands it. That's my thing. It's not that it's partially about me saying, hey, let's do the right thing, but it's also me as a business leader saying I have to protect the brand from any sort of vulnerabilities. And one of them is the fact that the consumer could say, hey, let's look inside K-Swiss and see if you're, what are you doing about ensuring there's a diverse workforce or that there's representation? And if I can't answer that, then the consumer's going to say, we're not buying your brand anymore. I mean, I think if you're in this industry with this consumer and you're not actively addressing this, Doesn't mean you have it figured out, but you've got to be at least, it's got to be on the top list of what you're working on. Then you're going to get exposed at some point, and it's not going to be a good look. And when I say look, I mean the consumer's going to cancel your brand. So part of it is doing the right thing, but part of it is just like protecting your business from what I think is a potential.
It's a vulnerability,
like cliff edge.
It's a vulnerability, 100%.
Yeah.
Even in, I like talking about financial literacy a lot. And I say, hey, if you want to make an impact on any organization, figure out where the money's going. Figure out when you spend that, $99 or $120, don't be lazy. Just figure out where your money's going at the end of the day. And that will really help shape your future purchases, correct?
Yeah, exactly. And you saw that, Adidas had some issues where their internal team sort of rose up or grouped together and said, hey, we're not being treated fairly. And that shook Adidas. That's like terrifying to have that kind of starting to get out there. And I'm sure they all of a sudden like leapt to attention and did some serious work internally to kind of try and stop that from snowballing into a massive public issue. So anyway, I'm not saying I've got it all figured out, but I'm certainly aware of it, and I'm trying to be proactive in things we do, which is like, make sure you have a pipeline of talent, and it's not about being hiring specific people because that's not good either. It's ensuring that when you get a pool of talent, is make sure it's representative of community, and then pick the best one. But if you only get 10 resumes from from white people, guess what? Who you're going to hire?
Yeah.
And it means that you've got to be proactive in ensuring you've got the resumes coming in from you have to work harder to recruit and to spread the word, and it causes harder work, but you end up with a much more representative pool of candidates. So there's things like you could set a target of, I want 20% of resumes to be from people of color or women, or whatever it ends up being. And so you may get thousands of resumes, but the 10 that I whittle it down to start interviewing, there's got to be a certain amount, and so that causes the people who are recruiting to work harder to put that in the pool. Then you pick the best and most applicable talent.
Isn't this is so crazy to me? Okay, think back. Think about all the media interviews you've done, podcasts, radio, TV, all of it, YouTube, all the stuff. It's really interesting. So I'm not black or white, Barney. I'm mocha. My mom is German and my dad is Jamaican. So I've always in my whole life been riding that middle ground. But I like to say, if I, God forbid, did something terrible and the cops are running down the street, they're not like, there's that half German guy. Like, it's just not going to happen. I'm identifying with, I'm a black dude, right? Now, how many black podcast hosts or media representatives do you get hit up by? Like in your whole career, like, think about how many times did a black person or a person of color interview you?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say it's never. I mean,
I get that. I mean,
it's not. It's actually,
but it's low.
I did IG live, so it has happened. It's not a rarity for me, to be fair. But
correct.
I know your point is that
yes,
there's probably not many, and but yeah, I mean, and I'm probably in an industry, or I'm networked in a way that I may, probably I get more interaction with black podcast hosts or IG live than some if you're in the car insurance industry. I don't know.
Of course. And my question there is more along the lines of being a beacon of hope, which means, and you've said this in many of your interviews prior, and FYI, I've done my digital deep dive on you. My life has been Barney for the last 72 hours, and it's my wife has even been like, yeah, I like that. Maybe we should ask about that. She really wanted to know the Bourbon thing. So shout out to my wife, Mrs. Holtz. This is not just a Ryan thing. The effort was teamwork here. But that being said, nothing stops anybody from getting into your direct messages and saying, hey, Barney, like, I'd love to talk to you about K-Swiss. Now, you can say no, but nothing stopping that initial intention of saying, hey, I'd like to talk to Barney. And you've talked about this lots where you said, listen, as people, and you said this, and man, it's really nice to hear this, but you said, people right now, the way you were kind of brought up in your childhood, going to school, picking the good little job, getting some student debt, you know, and working your way up the corporate ladder. Things aren't working that way. And, you know, you talked a lot about this too. I used to live in a suit. I would be talking to you right now in a tie and a bow tie, and I'm looking at you and I'm like, well, I see your style too. You're rolling up your pant legs, you know, you got your little 3/4 pant legs happening with your sneakers. So you're very fashion forward. My question to you though is, what would you say to somebody that says, well, hey, you know, shoot your shot and make a good effort of doing so? Is there any kind of tips and tricks that you could bestow on somebody that's kind of maybe lacking a bit of confidence, but you're saying, well, shoot your shot anyway?
Yeah, I think, you know, first of all, what I've learned over the years is that if you sit and wait for someone to come for you, you're going to be sitting there a long time. You've got to go out and grab it. And there's a lot of people that will sit there and be like, I wish, you know, like I was talking about this yesterday. So I had a young lady on my team, and we were in a presentation to a big retailer, and it was all on Zoom, but we were in the office, and she starts showing shoes, and I thought she did, you know, like data entry, you know, sort of data analytics on the product side. But she was standing up and talking to the customer about, I love this one. This is one I would wear. This is the color I really like. And I'm like, who's this? I was like, I didn't know she did this. And in that one meeting, she kind of put herself on the map, you know, and afterwards I was like talking to her like, wow, that was really good. You know, so she didn't sit there and wait for someone to say, hey, can you talk a little, you know, she's the consumer. Like, can you talk about this? And he just stood up and went, hey, here's what I think. And I was like, wow. And that's what it takes, you know, so if you sit there and wait. So you've got to be proactive. And the other thing is that when you're reaching out, like let's say it's a personal direct message or something, it's not only, you know, we talked earlier about being compelling, but it's also about bidirectional value. Okay. So if you just reach out and say, I'm just going to blab about my SEO company and we do this and we've saved these people money. It's like, it's you. It's like, it's not, you're just yelling at me. You're not, you know, what are you doing for me? That's, So like when I, for example, when you reach out to me about the podcast, okay, you're going to get a guest on your podcast and I'm going to get a chance to talk about the brand, which reaches an audience, which is like modern media, to be fair. Okay, it's bi-directional value. It's not just what can you trying to get something out. Because that's what it comes across as.
100%. Yeah, it comes back to that relationship, you know, type of deal. I also like to say to people, you know, watch how much you consume. You know, if you really want to do big things in life, make sure you're a producer. You know, for me, if I consume, let's say I watch 2 minutes of Gary V's video and there's one point out of there, I try to immediately go and act on the one point that I've learned from the video. Because to me, if I'm consuming too much, well, I'm not producing. I'm a big football guy. You know, defense does win the game, but you got to score some points. So you got to know how to ebb and flow between, you know, throwing the ball and catching the ball. You, prior to being president at K-Swiss, you're the marketing person. So that's where you really excel at as well. My definition of marketing for me is, you know, I mean, Seth Godin is somebody that I really love for marketing. And he says, hey, you know, just make things better by making better things. However, marketing for me comes to one word and one word only. And if you can, there's one word and one question. The first question I think great marketing does is answer immediately what's in it for them. That's one. The second point on the word is, I just want to be seduced. Seduction. Like, you don't go into a restaurant feeling like, you know, it's going to be crappy. It's going to smell, bad lighting. I'm going to go into that restaurant. Like, you're being seduced into that restaurant. If I'm looking at your shoe, I'm looking at details, the laces, the colorway, the sole. You know, what does it look like on a foot? You know, can I wear some tight pants with it? Is going to look good rolled up? Like, I'm thinking about all these details. And to be honest, I'm visualizing myself in the shoe. Like, I don't want to walk down the street feeling like I got these clunky things that I don't feel sexy in. I want to feel sexy, Barney.
Yeah, and exactly. I mean, it's human nature. You know, it's fashion is sort of is attraction, and in many cases. And you know, you walk, especially if you're like young and in say high school, or and you're walking down the corridor and you're in the wrong thing, that's like social suicide. You know? So, you know, when you said what's the one word about marketing, it's like I'm starting to write notes here and I'm like, God, there's so many. You know, the ones I'm like, yes, that's a good one. Oh, that's a good one. And I've got another couple. So there's lots of words and they're probably all relevant, but for me, it's about positioning. I always think about positioning, which is what does this thing stand for and what does it mean? Because when you put a brand on yourself, what does that say about you, right? And that's what's happening with, especially with young people in fashion, is like, what is that logo communicating to everyone about me? Okay, so if I've got an Under Armour logo on, it sort of probably means I've been to the gym, or I'm like, that person's not really that fashionable, but they're active, they're into the gym. If I see someone wearing Supreme, I'm like, okay, I know what you're about. Like these are brands of silent communication. So understanding what your brand stands for, and in K-Swiss's case, we're trying to make it about sort of California classic entrepreneurship as our kind of consumer muse and all those values. And then the other big word in marketing, I think, is attention. It's like, how do you get somebody's attention? Because that's what you're trying to do, and especially in a crowded market, is how do I get somebody to actually listen to me? And you might get like 1 second of someone's attention during a day, if you're lucky. And how are you trying to break through and have them listen to you? So, yeah, that's what's so fascinating about marketing. And I kind of came through that arm of business, and I still do some of it, but sort of a side hustle. My marketing team probably drive them crazy because I'm interested in it, so I'm always dabbling, but.
Because your brain is amazing. I mean, the one thing I love about you is the fact that you're able to take all your experience and leave all your experience in a flick of a dime. Like when I hear you talk, you can pull from your experience, so marketing, all these things, but then you also have this space in your head where you can completely drop your pre-existing thoughts and say, I didn't think of it that way. And that to me makes the brilliance of you.
Well, I mean,
say thank you, Barney. Say thank you, Barney. Say I received that, Barney.
Thank you, but it ain't that brilliant. But I think it's about if you're living in this era where the rate of change is like mind blowing. To survive, you can't be stuck in the past, especially if you're my age. In the sneaker business. Again, I'm not doing it because I'm brilliant. I'm doing it because like it's a survival mechanism. If I just really believe if I don't, I'm going to be left behind. Like this thing with NFTs and the whole crypto art and blockchain. And I honestly, the way I think about that is if I don't get on this now and understand it, I'm going to be left behind.
Yes.
And in terms of cultural relevance, in terms of the sneaker business and understanding the context of the consumer landscape I'm selling into, if I'm leading the brand, I don't understand that stuff. Like I lost touch. So I'm researching it and making sure I study up. So it's again, so when I say I can drop my past experience, it's because some of it's not relevant anymore. And rather than be like, oh, you don't know what it was like in my day. It was much better when I was a kid, all that kind of stuff that old people say. It's like, that's not going to get you anywhere. You got to drop that and be like, what's happening now? And I got to make sure I'm trying to be on top of it. And maybe I can sort of look at some of these new things, but have a bit more of a calm or maybe a little bit of extra wisdom of successes and failures where I can bring a different perspective to it.
You had said in one of your prior interviews, you said, hey, I know people are really big on the resume and, kind of put your, best foot forward, pun intended. However, nobody cares. Like when you're first interacting with somebody, if I get on the line with you right now and I say, Barney, me, you're just like, oh, okay, so somebody text me, I gotta go. So how does, and I want to play the empathy card here because, people who do kind of lead with their resume, a lot of the times it's because that's what they've been taught to do. Even as an employer, you might say, hey, we're looking for this specific position. Here's the requirements of the job. What would you tell somebody to say, well, lead with the resume, but you also got to lead as a human, if that makes sense?
Yeah, for sure. And but as progressive as things are becoming, the gatekeepers are still probably a little old school. So in other words, if you're trying to get on my desk or the head of HR, sending a resume is probably the way that we're doing it. Does that means that we're kind of a business that's now, if it was a young startup, they're like, resume, what are you talking about? But if you're trying to get into a corporation, the gatekeepers are still probably you got to know your audience. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like when you're marketing or selling, it's like you can't give the same pitch to an 18-year-old and a and a mother of a family. You know, I always say, like, if you have to sell in the same car and an 18-year-old comes in, you say, oh, this thing does 0 to 60 in 5 seconds. Mum comes in with the kids, you say, hey, this thing's the #1 safety rated. You know, like, customize your pitch based on who you're talking to. So I think when you're sending a resume in, it's like, try and understand who you're sending it to so you can make it personal. Certainly don't send the same resume to every job opportunity, because custom fit it. Okay, so if I'm going for this job, if you're trying to get me, hype up the sneaker experience or do you know what I mean? Don't just customize it every time you send it. And then I feel like brand names. The thing about resumes is having brand names on there. If you're not trying to be an entrepreneur, but you're trying to have a career long term, I believe brand names on your resume are really important. So early in your career, I would try and get into companies that people know. Because if I get a resume on my desk that says I worked at Apple, Google,
Nike, it sounds good already.
Goes to the top of the stack.
Yes.
Top of the stack versus somebody else may be smarter, better, but they worked at Joe's Towing and doesn't mean anything to me. So
let me give you a concept and ask you about this. So if I want to, because everybody listening to the show right now, I want you to listen to this really closely, okay? Because I'm gonna do like a live, what do I want to call, like a live potential prospect for a job. So if I know I want to work with Barney and he has a certain goal he wants to get to, my thesis on this is that I'm gonna respect Barney for where he's at currently. So if you like a paper resume, no problem. But then I'm also gonna respect you for where you want to go. So I'm going to send you the paper resume, but then I'm going to say, oh my God, sneakers and CEOs and sneakers. Wait a sec, podcasting, new media. Oh my God, he wants seductive. So then I'm also going to take my phone and I'm going to say, hey, Barney, Instagram. I just want to let you know I forwarded my resume over to Vanessa@CeosWearSneakers.com. I just want to introduce myself to you extremely quickly right now. I know you guys were kind of, requiring this, but honestly, Barney, I'm going to be honest with you right now. I'm a human. I just want to take myself out of that boring piece of paper. If you could maybe just kind of, check with Vanessa, take care, have a good day. Like, yeah, or you go, I've listened to 5 of your podcasts. You play into the ego. You're like, I just marathoned the CeosWearSneakers podcast. I listened to 5 episodes. I'm like, oh, you did? Yes, it's so true.
Play to the ego. You're reeling me in. I'm like, oh, I like this person.
Barney's laughing right now if you're watching this on video, but if you're hearing it on audio, he's laughing about it, but this is actually facts. These are what he's saying is really true. Sure. You got to marinate the ego a little bit. So you have a over 40-year-old Belarus guy who's crazy, full of energy, looks like he's on liquid nitrogen half the time or whatever the heck is going rocket fuel. And you say, oh my gosh, there's this new kind of audience that's saying, hey, maybe I don't want to grow up and be a basketball player. Maybe I don't want to grow up and be a rapper. Maybe I don't want to grow up and be, whatever. But this entrepreneur thing, this is looking really kind of sexy to me. Maybe I want to be an entrepreneur. Maybe I don't have to wear a tie anymore like my parents used to say I did. Maybe I can. Maybe I can actually get paid and wear sneakers to work at the same time. I mean, that might be a cool gig. Insert Gary V. So you figured, hey, I want to create a shoe with Gary, and you felt like Gary was the right vehicle to take what your goals were and then merge that with the audience. What was your thought process on that? And I've heard people ask you this question a lot, but I want to ask it a little differently. Was it always Gary, or was there a couple other names? You don't have to say the names, but how did you get to Gary?
Well, it actually came, the strategy and the positioning came first. It wasn't, I want to do a shoe with Gary. It was, I think there's an open lane around sneakers lined up against young entrepreneurs, because I know I can't beat Nike at athletes. So if you want to be the fastest runner, go buy Nike. I'm not going to take that fight on. It's like me trying to punch Mike Tyson. And Adidas is doing celebrities and all the rest of it. I'm like, oh my God, I can't beat them at that game, because I'm literally like 200 times smaller than the Adidas. But young people are trying to be entrepreneurs. So actually I could, and especially when you look at my classic sneaker, it fits, and a young entrepreneur was wearing a hoodie and a jeans and sneakers, but we're wearing nice things. They're not wearing, they still want to wear nice brands and things. So it was really an insight about entrepreneurship is the new aspiration of young people. And it's just played out more and more and more. Okay. Like kids aren't trying to be the third baseman of the Yankees. They're trying to be like, Whitney Wolf as a, young female just put Bumble on the stock exchange. Okay, she's a billionaire. I want to be her. So we called it Sneakers for Entrepreneurs, and then we were like, okay, who's the face? So if Jordan is Nike, if Nike's a basketball brand and Jordan's the face, and CeosWear is an entrepreneur brand, who's our Jordan? And back then, this is 2016, it was like, God, there weren't that many choices. I mean, the person I thought was really probably fit was Pharel, because he was not only culturally relevant, but he was just this smart cultural business mind. But he was already locked in with Adidas and but he was the sort of the ideal. And then I was just like, God, who else? There's lots of great entrepreneurs, none of whom were really known in the sneaker world. And there's lots of cool people, but none of them were legitimate entrepreneurs. And the more I researched, all roads pointed to Gary Vee. He was the voice of young entrepreneurship. And so, but I'm like, is it Gary? Because, it doesn't look like a sneaker endorser. He's, he's like you said, he's 40-year-old.
Yeah.
But, it ended up, I'm like, God, there's no other answer. It's him. He is doing it. So, I reached out and said, let's do the first signature sneaker for an entrepreneur. Bit tongue in cheek, and it was like, let's do it.
And what are you on now? Version 8 of this, or is it 6? Sorry, I can't remember. Version 8 or 6?
We sort of did so many. I think we kind of exhausted it for in terms of selling product. But we did about 10 different versions when all was said and done, when in terms of colorways and. But it's really about that exercise is really about positioning again. I talked about positioning and attention. Well, positioning is to say I'm the only sneaker brand that's really honed in on the entrepreneur. So I found my own lane, and then attention is having Gary Vee be the face. When you introduced yourself, you said I'm the #1 Black hosted podcast in Canada. Okay, that's positioning. You found yourself, multiple sort of ways of making yourself the first at something.
100.
Okay?
Here's what I love what you said, Barney. And not to
Huh?
interject here, because it leads me to the one thing it's probably your #1 quote I've ever heard you say. You said, listen, I believe in being first or being different. And I love that. Sorry, go ahead.
Exactly. So, we went through a similar exercise about like, okay, look, let's not try and be the biggest sports brand in the world, because that's real. Nike is 500 times bigger than us by revenue annually, 500. So if I go like, we're going to be the best sports brand in the world, everybody rah at the company meeting, but it's like, come on. Okay, can I be the best tennis brand? So now all of a sudden I went to here. And then the competitive set shrinks because I'm now a specialist, not a generalist. It's like you saying I'm the #1 of something in Canada. Okay, you've just made your competitive set like a little bit more manageable. And then I said, okay, well, tennis brands, a lot of tennis brands that make rackets, but in terms of real like heritage tennis brands, it's sort of us, Lacoste, Fred Perry. So if now I'm saying, okay, if we're a heritage tennis brand, we're down here, and then Fred Perry's British, Lacoste is French.
Yes.
We're American. We're founded in LA, still in LA. We're an American brand. So when I say we're a heritage American tennis brand, we're the only one.
Yes.
So then we say we're the only heritage American tennis brand.
Yes.
That's positioning. Yes. And that's CeosWear in 3 words in our history, right?
Yes.
So you're the #1 Black hosted podcast in Canada. I'm the #1 heritage American tennis brand. You're not the best podcast host, and I'm not the best sports brand, but you've whittled it into a winnable lane. And that's,
Barney, did you just give us a commercial? Man, I think I got to use that as a clip, eh? And I'll rewind it, put some crazy beats on it, make it dramatic.
Yeah. I disguised it in a thing, but essentially that was an ad.
Yeah, that essentially was an ad. Let me ask you this. How would you describe, have you heard of the brand? And I don't know, one of my favorite all-time pair of boots, comfort, kind of urban chic, literally had these things 6, 7, 8 years. They're just, it's almost like they look better with wear and tear, if that makes sense. They're Ben Sherman. Ben Sherman. Yeah. Have you heard it? That's a UK or a British brand, correct?
Well, yeah, I thought you were going to say Palladium, which is our sister brand, which is a boot. But Ben Sherman, I know Ben Sherman for shirts, for clothes, not for footwear necessarily.
Correct.
But they may have made a boot, but I really feel like they're 90% clothes. And from my youth, they made like button-down shirts was their staple item. That's what they were
So
known
so
for.
K-Swiss historically, especially for even the products you guys are putting out now, I feel there's a lot of timelessness in them. So for example, when you create a shoe for Gary, it's a lot different than, like you said, creating a t-shirt, because a t-shirt, the turnaround time on a t-shirt could be like quick.
Yeah.
Creating a shoe could be months by the time, design, production, all that stuff comes off. And then the shoe gets out and everybody's like, listen, we're on a new phase here. This shoe sucks. How do you build in the projection of how can we create something that when we do launch it, this thing's really going to pop?
Yeah, it's really hard. So to get that, because the sales cycle and the product cycle is so long in footwear. Yeah, it's about, we sell about 7 months in advance. So in other words, if a shoe's going to come out in January of next year, we start selling it to the retailer in June of this year. But in order to sell it to the retailer, I have to have a sample to show them to want to buy it. And that sample, to make it, I have to start making it, 4 months earlier than that. And then I have to design it prior to that. So the whole cycle through to retail is very long. It's probably, the traditional footwear cycle from idea to in-store is 18 months. So can I tell you what's going to be on trend in 18 months? No, because now the culture's moving so fast. So, but going direct to consumer is one way that brands have sped up the cycle by chopping out the retail. You don't have to sell to anyone anymore. And then once you have a product, you can decide, I put it up my website today and it's up for sale. So now I've taken probably a good 6 months out of the process.
Yes.
But it's still a long process. And I think, so speed to market is one of the big, and has been one of the big sort of imperatives of the footwear industry for many years. 3D printing, local production, fast turnaround times, all of these things but no one's really done it great. I mean, I think even the fastest have got it down to maybe 4 to 6 months.
Barney, how would you describe your style? We kind of touched on it, but if we go back even into the hip hop culture, baggy pants and all these things, and now, for me, the only words that come up to mind for my own style is more of a Euro chic / urban, where I'm very big on fit. If something doesn't fit well, like, it just will never come into my collection,
Yeah.
And it's just not going to work out for me. But have you always been a very fashionable person, or if I was to talk to Barney at 35 years old, would it be a little different?
Yeah, I think I've always been into fashion, but at this point, I think you got to act. I sort of like saying to myself, act your age. I love streetwear. I love brands. I could buy streetwear brands all day long, and now I'm the kind of the streetwear dad, and people are like, "Why is that dude dressed like a 18-year-old? It's embarrassing." No one wants to see me trying to be a fashion plate. So I've almost got to tone down my instincts and
interesting.
And you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So what I like to do is buy brands that, I might spend a lot of money on a jacket and just buy one jacket and just have it. And I'll try and like go, like a Amy Leon Dore or Maharishi is a brand I like, or APC or Stone Island, or some of these things have those pieces that are somebody who's in the knows, like, oh, okay, he knows what he likes, but it's trying to keep it down, trying to keep it calm.
And you enjoy life. Like, every time I watch you, you seem genuinely happy just to be there. Like, you're this energy, and I do believe now, obviously with COVID and the pandemic, I mean, you're at your house and I'm at my house, which is converted out. Long story, it's great. But, I look at it and I'm like, I still believe there's ways we can transfer energy through the internet. Obviously video, this is great because you can hear somebody, you can see their tonality, their eyes. For you, though, you seem like in every situation you're in, you're just genuinely really happy to be there. You're not like, oh, I got to do this, or, I got to do that.
I'm definitely not always happy-go-lucky, I'll be honest with you. But I'm definitely feel happy to be here. No question. I feel very lucky to be in the sneaker business, very lucky. And I really enjoy it. But, something we've had, 2020 was rough. I said to my team, we've all got PTSD. That was a tough year, and it wasn't much fun. But that's when you've got to be at your best. So not always fun, but definitely always curious. That's probably the thing about me, is like, I like to know what's going on and what's relevant. And I'll go and I learn every day. If I don't know something, someone says something, Google, what's that? Or,
yeah, I see you writing down. I see you writing down stuff as we're talking. You're writing words and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think, you as a host are an energetic host. So I think the truth is that your guests are playing off of your energy.
Correct.
We're trying to match your energy is what's really happening in terms of this dynamic. And I noticed that before. It's like your bar is high in terms of the energy you bring to a conversation. So somebody else is going to have to match that. So
do you want to know why, Barney, though?
I'd say it's you.
Say that again. Say that last piece. Sorry, that sounded really good. Say it again. No, it's because, to me, and for example, because you don't really know anything about me. I mean, I started my first business when I was 24 as a marketing agency. So I really cut my teeth in the automotive space. So back when Twitter was kind of coming in, I had done a campaign with Ford where we got put on the case study page alongside Barack Obama. So I, in 8 months, managed to create this campaign where we sold like 500, 600 cars off of a $200 ad. And so they took it and got a lot of media, and I'm known as the marketing guy. But, I've always kind of went on TV, radio, and did commentary. Like if a new iPhone drops, like, hey, Ryan, what's your opinion of the new iPhone? What is that going to look like? You know what I mean? And then I'm just like, I really love talking to people, and, had opportunities to maybe do like a radio show or a TV show. And I said, I don't want some producer just, basically taking all my vibe and soul out. So I'm going to create my own damn show. I'm a digital marketer. Yeah. Why can't I create my own show? And, 3 years ago we started, but only took it serious, 12 months ago. And we've had just some of the most incredible people like yourself on. We've, hit the charts. And it's just, and I go with the same format. We never write questions down. I do my research, but I don't like conversations that are, okay, Barney, I'm going to ask you a question. Because here's what happens. If I sit on here like a dead whale and I say, here you go, Barney, carry the weight of the interview, that's going to be a freaking boring interview. And I want you to leave this interview feeling like, man, I had a conversation with that guy. This wasn't just a Q&A, some sleepy thing that happened.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not easy. I've done a podcast myself, and man, I've always thought I've always dreamed of doing radio. And then once I'm going to do my own show, and I realized, man, this is like way more daunting than I thought it would be. And, I had all my questions listed down, and the mistake I made is the person I was interviewing would sort of go off on a tangent, and I'd be like, oh yeah, that's great. Back to versus following down the path. So, I was like, man, this is way harder than it looks.
Barney, you know what the thing is though? I think the magic is in the breadcrumbs, because when somebody goes on a downward thing, for example, right? You had Jordan Harbinger on your show, and he said, hey, if you really want to get to know some information about a potential guest, go into Wikipedia and go into Amazon reviews and read what some of these customers are talking about this potential person if they have a book out, right? You remember that conversation?
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And, I thought to myself, this is something that when that is the one thing I learned from that whole interview. And I actually immediately said, holy crap, yeah, and sure enough, like, I went on and, I'm like, holy crap, wait a second. And sometimes these people on the internet, I'm like, where do they get this information from? Like, they're complete cyber stalkers. But I've asked a few interviewees since this thing, and they're like, Ryan, like, I'm going to give you your flowers, man. How the hell did you know when I was 16 years old and I was standing in that back alley that this happened?
Yeah, it's like Nardwar. He's like famous for his research. And I think in anything you do, preparation is so important. And I would say that that's something I definitely focus on, is preparation. Like if I'm going into a meeting, or if I will make sure I'm fully prepared. I try not to wing anything, I'll be fine. I'll just go in there and rely on my smarts. It's like, no, I want to be really well prepared. And I kind of made a mistake the other day. We're working with a rapper called YG.
Okay. Yeah.
To drop us a name drop, and we went to work with him on a shoe design, and it was me and a designer who were there, and this is a brand partnership we have with him coming up, and he says to me, he says to us, he's like, oh, we talked about the new. I said, how'd you like the new album? Say, did you get the results you wanted? Blah blah blah. And then he says like, oh, which songs did you like on the album? And my designer's like, oh, I like this one, I like that one. And I'm thinking, I didn't listen to the album. and I was sort of, like that was a big mistake on my part to not have sort of, I was like, man, I missed that piece of preparation. That was
Barney. I'm going to call you out. I'm going to call you out, Barney. Jordan Harbinger on your show said, hey, my wife said, read the book, Jordan, before I interview the person, read the book. And he said, man, I didn't want to put in the work, but every time I read the book, it was a lot different interview.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah,
so,
that's okay,
my
though.
mistake. And that was recent, where I'm like, damn it, that was lesson learned. And always be learning. You know what I'm saying? Like, never be like, oh, I'm great at everything. It's like, no, mistake, learn, improve the next time, blah blah blah.
Well, we're creatures of habit. I mean, I look at your Instagram too, and it's you're definitely really focused on the K-Swiss brand, and that's where you put a lot of your social attention, which you can tell. But on your Instagram, your personal Instagram account, I mean, you got your family and. You're showing your little bag that you brought, the Herschel bag. And, it's funny, too, because when you ignored my first message, too, and I love when, because people are like, Ryan, you're so honest in your show. And I'm like, I am honest because people are going to hear the show. They have trust because I'm extremely transparent. But when you ignored the first message, I'm like, okay, I'm going to wait till he drops his next photo because I know this guy is going to be on his phone. And that's when the video came. As soon as I seen the bag, I'm like, oh, so you seen my direct message. And then you have the audacity to go and drop another picture on your grid. Oh, hell no. And when I sent that message, there was a certain, I'm going to will this into, this is going to happen. Like, I would have sent you one every Monday until you are either, F off or, hey, Ryan, okay, I just don't have time right now. But I need the answer. Like, give me the yes or give me the no. If you give me the no, I'm like, hey, no problem. Totally cool. But I'm not somebody that you can just ignore because I'm just like, I need that finale.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And, I think I try to sort of, especially on LinkedIn is the worst place for lazy salesmanship. And again, I'm not comparing because I know you're not selling anything, but I almost have this policy of delete anyone who just comes out with the cold sales message right off the bat.
You should. I think you should. I agree.
Come on. That's not how it's done. Like, you got to be better than that. And but I'm also, you don't want to be arrogant, and say like, oh, I'm going to ignore everybody but sometimes you just get hit up so much and with the DMs and stuff, you just can't get to them all in a great way. And every time you reply, there's a reply comes back. So you're in a dialogue now. And it's hard sometimes you feel like you're letting people down. But
it's not arrogance though. It's a respect for time. And I had another guest that put it a great way, and they said, listen, if I don't respond to somebody, it's nothing personal at all. It's just a respect for time. They're clearly coming at me because there's something that I want, which you talked about earlier about that, give and take, push and pull. But not right now is not no, maybe it's just not right now. Yeah. Seth Godin, I reached out to him a year prior. He's like, Ryan, I'm just too busy right now. I got my head down. I'm writing my book. And then as soon as I seen him start doing that little tour of books, fire back, hey, Ryan, I would love to.
Yeah, or you say, hey, I've got an audience of X that would really love to hear about K-Swiss, or, hey, my last podcast got this many listens. They'd love to hear from you. You're like, okay, well, all right, because we're going to respond to, we can't do everybody's podcast or everybody's IG live, but, I just did an IG live with someone, didn't have a big audience, but we were on a ClubHouse together. He wrote to me like, I'd love to do this, that, and the other. And I was like, I'd support the guy, if I've got the time. And like, who doesn't love, people love talking about themselves. That's the other big thing about human nature is people love talking about themselves. So, it's, if you ever want to start a dialogue with someone, ask them a question about themselves and it'll be... That's the truth. It is
the truth. I know we're kind of pressed for time. I got a couple questions left. However, I just really want you to talk a little bit about CEO and sneakers, your show, because I'm trying to parallel that with, you're almost essentially kind of running a little small media company inside of the brand, which is brilliant because you're dishing out content that is not just, hey, come buy our shoe. You're dishing out actionable content that's going to help people, whether you're talking to somebody who's a LinkedIn Michaela Alexa, or you're talking to Jordan Harbinger, and you're really getting these nuggets from people who are, at the top of their game in their chosen field. Why did you decide to do that, and kind of what is the goal of it?
So, well, first of all, I haven't done an episode in a long time, so that. Shame on me. But the original idea was that, brand communication now isn't about, spring, summer campaign, do an ad, print ad, stick it in a magazine, job done. Now it's just a clubhouse room where you're talking about the brand, a podcast, someone listening to this is now learning about K-Swiss. This is modern media. So number one, this is the new way. And if you're not doing this, then you're asleep at the wheel of marketing. Right?
Yes.
Number two, I really believe that brands have to be transparent because the consumer wants to know who you are, what you're doing. And I think some of these DTC brands like Everlane, Allbirds, Away Luggage, Bumble, Glossier. These are the most young progressive brands that have come out of who they are. They put their values on their sleeve. And that's the expectation now, is not this big gray building that churns out product, but like, who are these people? What are your values? And you communicate that by talking to people. So it was about brand transparency, and it was about kind of using modern media methods was the reason behind it. I built the podcast studio, and the office actually hired someone to kind of say, can you build, I don't even know what the equipment is, but I actually bought the foam tiles from Amazon myself and went in and stuck them all up, and bought some framed art from home and put it in the studio, and everyone came in on Monday morning and we had a podcast studio. Like,
yes, I love it. I love it.
Okay, and then I did my first interview and was like, oh my God, I'm terrible at this. Like, I thought this was going to be fun. Yeah. And I'm sweating bullets. I'm like, oh my God, I got to learn how to do interviews. But the first one, episode 1, was a guy called Mike Cherman, who's a guy I've known for a long time. And he is the CEO and founder of Chinatown Market, which has grown to be one of the hottest streetwear brands in the world. And if you go back and listen to that, it's still just an amazing story of a young dude who built his own brand and how he did it. And we talked a lot in this interview. You've asked me a lot about how do you break through to find opportunities, whether it's sending a resume, DMing someone. Well, Mike, early in his career, wanted to work for Jeff Staple, who's in the sneaker and streetwear world, one of the best known designers and creatives. And Mike, maybe he was 19 or 20 at the time, was like, I want to intern with him or work for him because he's the guy I want to be. So he created a little poster that said, I want to intern for Jeff Staple. And he learned Jeff's commute from the subway to his office, and he fly posted the poster all along. This is in New York City, all along Jeff's walk to work, so that Jeff's walking to work and he's seeing these repeating fly posters of I want to intern for Jeff Staple. And then Mike actually got arrested for fly posting one in the subway. Wow. He actually got arrested as well. So that's the length that he went to get himself noticed with the guy he wanted to work for. And of course he ended up interning for Staple. Long story short, went through a brand, failed, went through another brand. It's now Chinatown Market, one of the hottest streetwear brands in the world. So there you go. I mean, that's a better story than mine about how to kind of break through in terms of reaching a target you want to get a job opportunity.
Second last question for you, and I know you're a dad. I'm a father too, and that's going to be the number one role I play for the rest of my life, and I love it. My son is 4. I call him the king. My queen, Talia, is 21 months. So, Barney, I'm in the thick of changing diapers, man. And, and I'm very, very hands-on. It's put a coat on. Wait a second, I got spilled. I'm about to do an interview. I'm like, what just happened here? But I love it. If your kids were hearing their dad on this podcast right now, and this was the last kind of recorded audio that they got to hear, what are a couple key takeaways you'd want your kids to hear their dad say?
Oh man, that's first of all, I tell them all the time. So I'm not a distant dad who can't express his feelings. Actually, that's the opposite. They're like, Dad, seriously, get away from me. Leave me alone. I'm like, I love you though, right? I mean, I tell my kids I love them 10 times a day. So I hope that there's nothing that's sort of unsaid. That's what I would hope, is that if something happened to me, they wouldn't have any questions about what I feel about them or anything like that. So, I think in terms of personal stuff, I'll leave that between me and them. But, in terms of their lives, I think, I want them to be happy. And I think happiness is way more important than trying to be rich. And especially for young people, is try and get into a career that actually means something to you personally. Like, understand what it is that makes you tick. Because when you're young, you don't really know. And I'm not being condescending, but when I was 20, like, I I remember I didn't realize I was really creative. So I was going off into a field of sales, and I hated, if I'd have actually spent the time to be like, what actually do I enjoy? And then let me try and find a career. Let me target a career that fits my personality. That leads you to a life of happiness if you can spend every day doing something that means something to you, versus I love bourbon and I love sneakers and I'm do this, that, and the other, and I'm in every day I have to go and sell car insurance. I'd be like soul destroying, right? But you don't take the time when you're young or necessarily know what that is that inside you that makes you tick. So I think that's what I'll do for my kids as they get to that age, is sort of say, let's spend the time to really understand what it is that, like write the list of things you're passionate about. And now let's target a career or companies that can line up to that. And so many people don't do it, to be honest, or they'll go for the money and then it's not the right way to do it. So I don't know. That's probably what I would tell them.
Last question. I love that. Last question I ask everybody. You've given me 56 minutes and 26 seconds of your life, Barney. What can I do for you? And don't give me a generic, boring answer. What can I do for you? It's a big question.
Well, I'd have to think. First of all, you've done it for me. So number one, thank you. You're letting me tell my story. First of all, you let me talk about myself, which, like I told you, people love to do. So it's been super fun. I appreciate all the research you did. It's been a platform for K-Swiss, which thank you. So you've done it, really. And I think, stay in touch. Let's keep talking and send me things you see of interest and I'll do the same. And sometimes you do these things and we never speak again, but, stay in touch and let's see how it goes and how we help each other. I mean, certainly, I think being a supporter of the brand, and we have a partner in Canada that's building the brand, and we need all the support we can get as a challenger brand. Like every pair counts, every consumer counts. So if you become a, more of an ongoing partner of ours or a supporter of ours, that would be cool. But let me give you something really tangible. Is like, put a K-Swiss shoe on your shelf and take one of those Nikes off, and that would be, until the president of Nike comes in your podcast. That's something you could really